A fateful morning in New York. Autumn in New York was like an oil painting. Central Park's trees adorned in golden hues, the streets filled with the aroma of freshly baked pastries and warm coffee. Charlotte Charlie Hayes was practically flying down the sidewalk, clutching her phone while muttering a never-ending to-do list in her head. She had a client meeting at 10 a.m., but first, coffee. Since stepping into the world of freelance editing, coffee had become her lifeline. Without it, she'd collapse in front of her laptop like a zombie straight out of a horror movie. So the moment the doors of the roasted beans swung open, she made a beeline for the counter and ordered a large latte. And then, bam! Charlie crashed into a wall. No, not a wall. A man. A very tall man in a very expensive gray suit who had just stepped away from the counter. And worst of all, her latte had spilled directly onto his designer suit. The air turned deathly silent. Charlie froze. The man in front of her was equally stunned, though his reaction was eerily calm. He simply looked down at the spreading coffee stain on his suit, then lifted his gaze slowly to meet hers. Charlie swallowed hard. His eyes were sharp, as if they could see straight into someone's soul. His face was perfectly sculpted, each feature carved to perfection. If she weren't in the middle of a disaster, she might have pinched herself to make sure she hadn't just stumbled into a Hollywood movie. But wait, had she just spilled coffee on a ridiculously wealthy, CEO-looking stranger? Charlie's brain went into emergency mode as she blurted out, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I was in a rush. I was thinking about work, and I didn't see you. Do you need me to pay for dry cleaning? Wait, no. I'd probably have to sell a kidney to afford it." The man just stared at her, saying nothing. After a few agonizing seconds of silence, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a spotless white handkerchief. Not to wipe his suit, but he handed it to her. Charlie blinked, her brain short-circuiting. "Why are you giving me this? Wipe your hands." His voice was deep and smooth, yet as cold as an Alaskan winter. Charlie gaped. Aren't you the one who actually needs it?" The man raised an eyebrow as if she had just asked a ridiculously obvious question. "I don't use other people's handkerchiefs." That made her pause. "Then, why are you giving it to me?" "Because I also don't like watching someone fumble around, unable to handle a situation properly." "What?" Charlie was speechless. She was the one who had ruined his suit, yet somehow he was acting like she was the one who needed help. "Do you even hear yourself?" she muttered, then instantly regretted it when his ice-cold gaze flicked back to her. Not wanting to escalate the situation into an expensive lawsuit, she quickly grabbed the handkerchief, wiped her shaking hands, and bolted out of the cafe. She had no idea that this bizarre encounter was only the beginning. 3 days later, when Charlie thought she had dodged a bullet, a different suit-wearing man appeared at her doorstep. He looked like he had just stepped out of a high-end legal drama, his expression composed, his glasses pristine. "Miss Hayes!" Charlie frowned. "Who is this guy?" "I am Richard Kensington, legal representative of Mr. Theodore Blackwood." Her jaw dropped. "Wait, who?" "Mr. Theodore Blackwood. Do you recall 3 days ago at the Roasted Bean?" "Hold on, he's not suing me, is he? I already apologized. I didn't mean to spill coffee on him." Richard remained utterly calm. "No, Mr. Blackwood has no intention of suing you. Quite the opposite. He has a proposal." Charlie's eyes narrowed. "What kind of proposal?" Richard handed her a thick document. "A 1-year marriage contract with Mr. Blackwood." Her brain short-circuited. What?" Richard adjusted his glasses smoothly. "Mr. Blackwood requires a wife in order to fulfill a clause in his late grandmother's will. If he does not marry within the year, Blackwood Industries will fall into the hands of his cousin." Charlie cut in. "Let me guess. Some reckless gambler or a supercar-obsessed playboy?" "Close. He has an unusual passion for investing all of his assets into parking lots." Charlie blinked. "Parking lots?" "Yes, he plans to build 100 parking lots across New York City." "Dear God, this world is insane." Richard continued, "Mr. Blackwood refuses to be trapped in a political marriage or be forced into an engagement with some wealthy heiress. So he chose you. No scandals, no ulterior motives, and what? Richard hesitated before saying, he claims that you have the ability to talk so much you could make a man choke on his drink. Charlie, Theo Blackwood, you are so dead. After an entire night of weighing the pros and cons, Charlie found herself listing the benefits of this ridiculous arrangement. $1 million, enough to pay off her debts, support her younger brother's education, and even buy a decent apartment. Full sponsorship for her brother, which was worth more to her than money. A once-in-a-lifetime story to tell. So the next morning she stood in front of Theo Blackwood once again, but this time she deliberately spilled coffee on his suit, on purpose. I accept. Theo blinked, looking down at his ruined suit, then back at her. For the first time his lips curved into the slightest smirk. And just like that, a marriage contract between an icy billionaire and a woman who could talk people into choking officially began. Hello, Soul Stories family. I hope you're all doing well. May God bless you with love, joy, and peace. I pray your days shine bright, your burdens ease, and your dreams come true. How did our last story touch you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I truly value them. You're more than subscribers, you're family. Your presence means the world to me. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to become part of the Soul Stories family. If anyone ever believed that weddings were sacred moments, where the bride and groom gazed into each other's eyes under the soft glow of candlelight, they had clearly never witnessed the wedding of Theodore Blackwood and Charlotte Hayes. No dazzling diamond ring, no emotional vows, no romantic violin playing in an elegant ballroom. Instead, they got married in a legal office, with a bored clerk chewing gum while typing sluggishly on a keyboard. Charlie tilted her head, feeling as if she were signing a loan contract rather than getting married. The man before her, her husband in legal terms, sat rigidly in his black suit, exuding a sharp yet emotionless aura that was as frustrating as it was intimidating. He signed the marriage certificate as though he were finalizing a business transaction. No hesitation, no sentiment. Does being your wife come with a VIP membership at any fancy restaurants? She blurted out, breaking the tension. Theo frowned slightly, but before he could respond, Richard Kensington, his ever-composed lawyer, smoothly interjected, in fact, Miss Hayes, you will have unlimited access to all restaurants owned by the Blackwood Group. Charlie's eyes lit up, her inner self screaming, at least there's one real benefit in this marriage. She quickly signed, while Theo watched her with a confused expression. Had she just gotten more excited about free meals than about marrying him? Something inside him stirred, an odd feeling he couldn't quite place, but in the end, he simply adjusted his cufflinks, reminding himself that this was just a contract, nothing more. Even so, he couldn't shake the strange sense of unease settling in his chest. The luxury car glided through the cobblestone streets of New York, carrying a woman still in shock from marrying a billionaire. Charlie leaned back in the seat, staring out the window, processing everything that had happened in the past few hours. Meanwhile, Theo sat at a safe distance, maintaining his usual calm demeanor. But if someone looked closely, they would notice his fingers lightly clenching his suit fabric, as if he were trying to suppress an unfamiliar feeling. When the car finally stopped before an enormous mansion, Charlie's jaw dropped. Don't tell me this is your house? Theo, still focused on his phone, responded flatly, where else? Charlie could hardly believe it. The mansion was so massive, she was sure she could get lost inside. As soon as she stepped into the grand entrance, a wave of cold emptiness washed over her. Not from the temperature, but from the atmosphere. Everything was perfect, but also soulless. You actually live here alone? Theo nodded, not thinking much of the question. Charlie frowned slightly, a strange pang of discomfort settling in her heart. Living alone in this castle-like mansion, with no family, no friends visiting. Suddenly, she felt a little sorry for him, but then she glanced at him again, still as emotionless as a statue, and quickly shook her head, reminding herself, don't get soft, Charlotte. This is a contract marriage, not a romantic fairy tale. Even so, she secretly gave nicknames to different rooms in the mansion to make it feel less intimidating. Living room. The cold cave, because it was ridiculously spacious but eerily empty. Theo's office, the Museum of Silence, because she could already tell no one dared to make noise there. Kitchen in the untouchable sanctuary, because she just discovered that Theo didn't cook. When she casually asked, "Do you ever cook for yourself?" Theo replied, completely unashamed, "Why would I cook when I have a chef?" Charlie folded her arms, smirking. "Wow, you're literally the textbook definition of a cold billionaire in every drama series." Theo shrugged, not denying it. But one thing he couldn't understand was why, when he was around this woman, he always felt like he was being teased. Newlywed struggles, when two worlds collide. Living together quickly turned into a never-ending battle. The war of noise. Theo loved silence. Charlie loved EDM. Loud EDM. One morning, Theo was in an important online meeting with his board of directors when suddenly from the next room, "Turn down for what?" Boom! The entire meeting room froze. The CFO choked on his coffee, and the company lawyer mysteriously lost connection. Theo stood up abruptly, storming into Charlie's room, his expression dark as a thunderstorm. "Off!" Charlie, still typing on her laptop, simply shrugged. "No can do. I'm in my creative zone." 1 second later, Theo unplugged her speaker. "Charlie." Charlie gasped, glaring at him, while Theo calmly walked away, leaving behind a furious editor whose beloved EDM playlist had just been stolen. The midnight meal battle. Theo ate dinner at precisely 7 p.m. Charlie? She ate whenever she felt like it, even at 2 a.m. One night, Theo walked into the kitchen and found Charlie casually eating pancakes dipped in hot sauce. "What are you even eating at this hour?" Charlie raised an eyebrow, dipping another piece into the sauce. "Because it tastes amazing." Theo shuddered, suddenly convinced that some things in this world were beyond comprehension. Despite their constant clashes, Theo gradually noticed something changing. His once cold and lifeless mansion no longer felt as empty, and more importantly, he himself was changing in ways he never expected. Theo Blackwood prided himself on his self-control. He could negotiate billion-dollar deals without batting an eye. He could silence a room full of shareholders with just one sentence. But there was one thing he couldn't control: Charlie Hayes. That small, stubborn, infuriatingly optimistic woman had completely turned his world upside down. Ever since she stepped into his mansion, everything had been chaos, but in a way that made it feel alive. In the mornings, she walked barefoot into the kitchen, her hair a mess, wearing his oversized hoodie without even realizing it. And every single time, his heart skipped a beat. At night, she curled up on the couch, watching action movies, shouting whenever the hero landed a perfect kick. And Theo found himself torn between being annoyed by the noise or watching her with an uncontrollable smile. The worst part, she had no idea. She had no idea that every touch, every mischievous smirk, every little frown of hers had become something he looked forward to every day. But Theo Blackwood was not the kind of man who lost control over a woman. At least that's what he thought. It was a peaceful Friday night, or at least it was, until Charlie decided to mess with him. They were watching a movie. Well, Charlie was watching, while Theo just happened to be sitting next to her, nursing a glass of wine. Halfway through, Charlie suddenly turned to him. "Want to bet?" Theo raised an eyebrow, shifting his gaze from the screen to her. "Bet on what?" "Whether the main character survives or not." Theo considered it seriously. "Dies. Lives. And what's at stake?" Charlie narrowed her eyes, grinning devilishly. "If I win, you have to play truth or dare with me." Theo immediately frowned. "That childish game." "What? Are you scared of losing?" There was no way Theo Blackwood would let a woman challenge his pride. He nodded in agreement, completely unaware that he was walking into a trap. And of course, Charlie won. She threw her hands in the air, celebrating, while Theo looked like he had just lost a major business deal. "I didn't expect it to end like that," Charlie shrugged. "That's what you get for underestimating my ability to predict storylines." Theo sighed in defeat, placing his wineglass on the table. "Fine. Rules?" Charlie's eyes sparkled with pure mischief. "Simple. You either answer honestly or take a dare. Theo gave her a cold, unreadable look. Do your worst. The truth that shook him. The game began. Charlie forced Theo to confess things he never thought he'd say, like how he hated eggplant, or how he once nearly cried as a kid when his grandmother scolded him unfairly. It was amusing until it was Charlie's turn. Truth or dare? Charlie grinned, thinking nothing of it. Truth. Theo tilted his head slightly, his gaze sharpening. Have you ever been in a serious relationship? The question was simple, but Charlie's reaction caught Theo completely off guard. She froze, she bit her lip, lowering her gaze. And after a moment of hesitation, she admitted softly, No. Theo thought he misheard. You mean never? Charlie's face turned red as she glared at him. Are you deaf? I just said it. Theo felt his fingers slip. His wine glass fell onto the carpet, shattering the silence between them. For the first time, the air felt different. Theo blinked a few times, trying to process what he had just heard. You're joking, right? Charlie crossed her arms, tilting her head at him in mock defiance. Is there a problem? Or does a woman need a long dating history to qualify for a contract marriage? Theo cleared his throat, looking away, because his mind was spinning. But the truth was, his heart was racing. From that moment on, Theo couldn't look at Charlie the same way. Every time she laughed freely, every time she curled up with a blanket, every time she yawned and stretched like she had no care in the world, he couldn't stop thinking about that one fact. She had never seriously dated anyone. That meant her smiles, her glances, her little reactions. They were all new, untouched, genuine. That meant she wasn't like the other women he had been with. That meant every moment with her had never belonged to anyone else before. That meant he wanted to be the first. He wanted to be the only one. And it was driving him insane. One morning while Charlie was making coffee, she hummed a song softly, completely unaware of the effect she had on him. Theo stood nearby, watching her from behind. A ridiculous thought entered his mind. What if she belonged to someone else? What if one day some other guy walked into her life? Someone who made her laugh like that? Someone who got to wake up next to her every morning? Theo clenched his coffee cup, an unfamiliar feeling twisting in his chest. For the first time, he realized something terrifying. He was jealous, and not of a real person, but of a man who didn't even exist yet. The thought of Charlie being with someone else made something in him snap. He didn't want to lose her. He didn't want to wake up one day and watch her walk away. He didn't want her to smile at another man the way she smiled at him. He wanted her to be his. The only question was, did she feel the same way? And if she did, what the hell was he supposed to do about it? New York, a winter night colder than usual. Theo Blackwood never thought he could lose control. His entire life had been meticulously planned, every move calculated, every schedule precise down to the minute. And yet tonight, he was sitting beside a woman's bed, holding her hand tightly, unwilling to let go. That woman was Charlotte Hayes, his contract wife, and the person who had shattered every rule he had ever set for himself. The fever and the panic of a man who doesn't know how to love. It had started that afternoon. When Theo returned home, the eerie silence of the mansion unsettled him. Normally, Charlie would be blasting EDM, running around with a bag of snacks in her hands. But today, nothing. Frowning, he took off his coat and hurried upstairs. The moment he opened her bedroom door, he froze. Charlie was curled up under the covers, her face flushed red from a fever, her breathing shallow. He had never seen her this quiet before. This was a woman who was always full of energy, always chattering nonstop, always annoying him to no end. And yet now she looked small, fragile, and for some reason that terrified him. Theo rushed to her side, placing a hand on her forehead. The burning heat made his chest tighten. "Charlie!" His voice was hoarse with worry. Her eyelids fluttered open slightly, her gaze hazy as she looked at him. "Oh, you're home," she whispered, attempting a weak smile. That smile made something twist painfully inside him. For the first time in his life, Theo Blackwood had no idea what to do. He called the doctor immediately. 30 minutes later, after checking her over, the doctor reassured him that it was just a regular fever. But even with that assurance, Theo couldn't relax. He canceled $1 billion meeting for the next day, ignoring his assistant's frantic protests over the phone. I have something more important to do. And that something was Charlie. In the dimly lit bedroom, the soft glow of the bedside lamp cast long shadows against the walls. Outside, New York City remained alive, neon lights flickering, traffic moving in an endless flow. But inside this room, the world felt quieter, warmer. Charlie, now propped up slightly on the bed, still looked pale, but much better than before. Theo sat beside her, arms crossed, his gaze distant. For once, they weren't bickering. They weren't teasing each other. There was only silence, the kind that wasn't awkward, but filled with unspoken thoughts. Charlie turned her head slightly, her voice hoarse from the fever. You don't have to sit here and babysit me, you know. You look like you haven't slept in days. Theo didn't immediately respond. He simply stared at his hands that were always busy with contracts, numbers, decisions that could shift the market in a second. Tonight, he had nothing in his hands, just her. I'm not used to skipping work, he admitted quietly. But tonight, I feel like if I leave, I'll be missing something far more important. Charlie raised an eyebrow despite her fatigue. Oh, you mean me? Theo exhaled a small, amused laugh, shaking his head. You never miss an opportunity to tease me, do you? Charlie smirked, but her expression softened. Tell me something real, Theo. Who are you? Really? Theo was silent for a long moment, as if the question was too difficult to answer. How long had it been since someone asked? How long had he been keeping everyone at arm's length, including his own feelings? I'm the only son of the Blackwood family, he finally said, his voice low, steady. Since I was a child, I was told that I would inherit the family empire. There was never a choice, no room for mistakes, no chance to say no. Charlie listened intently, not interrupting. I don't even remember the last time I was truly happy, Theo admitted with a hollow chuckle. My life is filled with board meetings, numbers, and contracts that, if handled wrong, could cost thousands of people their jobs. Everyone thinks I have everything: money, power, respect. But the one thing I don't have is freedom. Charlie inhaled sharply. She had always seen Theo as this untouchable, perfectly composed businessman, but now she realized he was just a man carrying a weight he never asked for. Then why not walk away, she asked softly. Theo shook his head. My grandmother. She built Blackwood Industries from the ground up. If I walk away, it's not just betraying her. It's betraying the thousands of people who rely on this company. Some things you can't just walk away from. Charlie understood. She understood more than anyone what it was like to be tied down by responsibility. She swallowed, then asked the question that had been on her mind for a while. Have you ever been in love? Theo smiled, but it was bittersweet. I thought I was. She was my childhood friend, the only person who didn't see me as just Theo Blackwood, the billionaire. But in the end, she fell in love with someone else. Charlie's heart ached slightly, but she hid it behind a teasing tone. Wow, so you're saying I'm your first wife and your first real relationship? What a lucky man you are. Theo chuckled, shaking his head. But then he turned to her, his blue eyes unusually soft. And you? What's your story? Charlie hesitated for a second before sighing. I grew up in a home that had nothing but love. But then my world fell apart when my parents died in a car accident when I was 15. Theo's jaw tightened. He hadn't known that. From then on, I became everything. Sister, mother, provider. I worked multiple jobs, barely slept, and still had to keep my grades up. It was hell, but I didn't hate it. She smiled softly, though there was pain behind it. If anything, it made me realize how much I valued life. I learned to laugh even when things were awful, because if I didn't, who would? Theo stared at her. Before, he had always thought Charlie was just carefree, someone who made everything into a joke. But now he realized she wasn't carefree. She was resilient. She didn't laugh because life was easy. She laughed because she had survived things that should have broken her. And suddenly he admired her even more. So that's why you're always smiling? He asked. Charlie nodded. If I don't smile, I'll cry. and I don't have time for that. Theo had never met anyone like her, a woman who could turn pain into strength, who could take loss and turn it into motivation. And for the first time in his life, Theo Blackwood wanted to protect someone, not because of obligation, not because of a contract, but because he wanted to. They sat in silence, their hearts speaking louder than words. And in that moment, Theo knew Charlie wasn't just his contract wife anymore. She was the woman who had changed everything. When Charlie woke up, everything had changed. The sunlight had already spilled into the room by the time Charlie opened her eyes. Her body felt lighter. The fever had subsided, and the exhaustion that had weighed her down the night before had mostly faded. But what truly stunned her wasn't the fact that she was feeling better. It was the man who had fallen asleep beside her bed, Theo Blackwood. The cold, distant CEO, the man who always seemed untouchable, was now completely vulnerable, his head resting on his arm, his posture utterly unguarded. And more than that, he was still holding her hand. Charlie's breath hitched. Why? Why would a man like him leave behind his entire empire just to stay here? Why did he worry enough to sit by her bedside all night? And most terrifying of all, why did she feel like crying over something so small? She tightened her fingers around his hand just slightly. Theo stirred, shifting a little, but didn't wake up. And as she sat there staring at him, watching him sleep, Charlie realized something with absolute certainty. This marriage contract no longer had control over her heart, and deep down she hoped it no longer had control over his either. Time was moving too fast. Charlie never imagined that 1 year could pass in the blink of an eye. When she first signed the contract, she had convinced herself that this was nothing more than a business transaction. 1 year as Theo's wife, a generous sum of money, and then she'd leave. No emotional attachment, no regrets. But now, less than a month remained. And instead of relief, all she felt was dread. She didn't want to leave, because she had fallen in love with Theo Blackwood. She loved the way he looked at her when she laughed, the quiet way he listened when she rambled about her favorite books, the deep furrow of his brow when he had stayed up all night taking care of her when she was sick. She loved the way his fingers would accidentally brush against hers when they sat next to each other. But what about Theo? Did he love her too? Or was this still just a contract to him? Charlie didn't dare ask, because she was terrified of the answer. A man who can control everything, except his own feelings. Theo Blackwood had built his entire career on control. He could sign a billion-dollar deal without hesitation, make cutthroat business decisions that would alter the financial landscape in an instant. But when it came to Charlie, he was utterly clueless. He wanted to keep her. God, he wanted to keep her. He wanted to tell her she wasn't just part of a contract, that she had become everything. But he didn't dare say the words, because for the first time in his life, Theo Blackwood was afraid. Afraid of what he might lose if he confessed and she didn't feel the same. Afraid of breaking something fragile between them. Afraid that the moment he reached for her, she'd slip right through his fingers. And so, like the fool he never thought he could be, he kept his mouth shut. But deep down in the depths of his carefully guarded heart, he prayed she wouldn't leave. When the past comes knocking, while Charlie was lost in her hazy thoughts about the future, a new figure emerged, making things even more complicated. James Walker. James was a cardiothoracic surgeon, young, handsome, and effortlessly charming, the kind of man women fell for without a second thought. But the most important detail? James had liked Charlie since their university days. They had been classmates, but back then, Charlie had been too busy juggling jobs, taking care of her younger brother, and surviving day by day to pay attention to romance. Now, years later, James had returned. And this time, he wasn't hiding his feelings anymore. Have you ever thought about being with someone not because of a contract, but because of real love? James asked one evening as they sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. Charlie froze for a moment. Real love? She had thought about it, but her heart had long belonged to someone else. James held her gaze, his voice steady. Charlie, if you ever need someone to love you for real, I'm right here. She let out a soft laugh, but inside she was conflicted. James was a good man, a really good man. He would be a perfect choice if only her foolish heart wasn't set on a man who refused to say how he truly felt. But how much longer could she wait for Theo? That night, Theo came home late after another exhausting day of meetings and reports. What he didn't expect was to walk into his own living room and find James Walker sitting comfortably on his couch. Across from him, Charlie was holding a bouquet of vibrant red roses. Theo stopped dead in his tracks. For the past year, he had never seen Charlie receive flowers from anyone else. The only bouquets she ever got were the ones he sent her, whether out of obligation to his grandmother or some unspoken instinct he refused to acknowledge. But now another man had given her flowers. And worst of all, she was smiling at him, the same radiant, teasing, warm smile that she usually reserved for Theo. A sharp, unfamiliar pain twisted in his chest. Before he realized it, his grip on his whiskey glass had tightened. "Oh, look who's home, my husband." Charlie turned to him, her tone playful, but there was a flicker of something else in her gaze, something that told Theo she was watching his reaction. James stood up, offering his hand in greeting. "Nice to meet you. I'm James Walker, an old friend of Charlie's." Theo stared at him. The handshake was polite, friendly, even respectful. But Theo didn't want to shake his hand. Because this man had walked into his house, sat on his couch, brought flowers for his wife. What kind of old friend did things like that? But Theo Blackwood wasn't the kind of man to let his emotions spill out easily. He kept his face unreadable, shaking James's hand with the bare minimum of politeness, but saying nothing. Charlie watched them, her lips curling slightly as if she found something amusing. "What's wrong?" She tilted her head, her tone laced with teasing. "It's not like I'm yours forever." Theo felt like he had been punched. Right. The contract was ending. She wasn't going to be his wife anymore. This would all come to an end. He wouldn't see her every morning, wouldn't hear her nagging him about skipping meals, wouldn't find her dancing in the kitchen while blasting music at 7 a.m. She would leave, and someone like James would get to be with her. Theo couldn't stand the thought. Charlie noticed his silence. She knew what he was thinking, but she wasn't sure if he would ever have the courage to say it out loud. The tension in the room was suffocating. Before either of them could break it, James checked his watch and smiled. "I don't want to intrude on your evening," he said, smoothly standing up. "I'm sure we'll be seeing each other again." He turned to Charlie, his voice softer now. "Think about what I said, okay?" And then he was gone, leaving behind an eerie silence. Charlie sat back down, casually inspecting the bouquet. "Beautiful, right?" He still remembers, "I love red roses." Theo stared at her, his emotions boiling over in a way he wasn't used to. He wanted to rip those flowers out of her hands. He wanted to tell her she didn't need them. He wanted to tell her she didn't need anyone else. But instead, his voice came out colder than he intended. "Do you like him?" Charlie paused. She set the bouquet down, meeting his eyes head on. "Are you asking as my husband?" Theo opened his mouth, but nothing came out. As her husband? As a man whose contract was about to expire? Or as a man who loved her but was too afraid to admit it? He didn't know, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't let her go. Not now, not ever. The entire day, Theo felt like thousands of ants were crawling inside his chest, an unbearable restlessness that made it impossible to focus on anything. Everything around him felt meaningless. Even the high-stakes meeting with an important business partner had turned into a blur of white noise. Because there was only one thought dominating his mind, Charlie was out having dinner with James. James, the perfect doctor, the charming, well-mannered, effortlessly attractive man. And most importantly, he didn't need a contract to have Charlie. The thought felt like a punch straight to Theo's chest. He had never considered the possibility of losing her. After all, there had always been a contract binding them together. But now, with less than a month left, the contract would expire, and she would walk away. She wouldn't live in the mansion anymore. She wouldn't randomly jump onto the couch whenever she saw a tiny spider or blast EDM at 2 a.m. She wouldn't nag him about not getting enough sleep, overworking, or skipping meals. She wouldn't be his anymore. The thought froze his blood. A tight, suffocating feeling settled in his chest, as if someone was crushing his ribcage. All evening, Theo did nothing but wait. He wasn't the kind of man to lose his composure easily, but tonight he couldn't control himself. He paced back and forth in the living room like a caged animal, glancing at the clock every few minutes. 9 p.m. They must have finished ordering by now. Was James making her laugh? Did her eyes sparkle the way they always did whenever she teased Theo? Jealousy burned through him. He had never thought of himself as a jealous man. But with every passing second that Charlie wasn't here, he wanted to storm into that restaurant, pull her away, and shout to the world that she was his. Not James's, not anyone else's. 10 p.m. Damn it. Theo tightened his grip around his whiskey glass, but his hands were shaking so much that a few drops spilled onto his fingers. He slammed the glass onto the table, nearly shattering it. Where was she? Did she even know that he was going insane waiting for her? Did she realize that he loved her so much that the thought of her with someone else was unbearable? Then finally the front door opened. Theo spun around instantly. Charlie walked in, still wearing the deep blue dress she had chosen before leaving. Her hair was slightly tousled, and her cheeks were flushed, probably from wine, and she was smiling. Smiling. Something exploded inside Theo. Before she could even say a word, he strode across the room, grabbed her wrist, and pulled her toward him. "What's wrong with you?" Charlie blinked at him in surprise, but before she could finish her sentence, his lips crashed into hers. Theo kissed her fiercely, desperately, possessively. There was no more hesitation, no more restraint. This kiss was a claim, a declaration. Charlie froze for a few seconds, completely caught off guard. But then she felt it. Everything Theo was trying to tell her through this kiss. The longing, the fear of losing her, the love he had been suppressing for too long. When Theo finally pulled away, his breath was ragged, his deep blue eyes locked onto hers. "I don't care about the contract," he rasped, his voice hoarse and raw with emotion. "I don't care about any of the terms. I only care about one thing. You. I love you, Charlie." Charlie froze. Everything she had ever wanted to hear, everything she had been waiting for, was right there in front of her, but she still couldn't believe it. "What did you say?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Theo tightened his grip on her hands, his gaze unwavering. "The contract may end," he said, his voice steadier this time, "but my love for you won't. Don't leave me, Charlie. Don't be with anyone else. Be my wife, not because of a contract, but because you love me too." This time, Charlie's tears fell. "You idiot!" She laughed through her tears. "I've loved you for so long." And then she threw herself into his arms. Their next kiss was different. No longer desperate, no longer a battle for control. This time it was pure, deep, and full of understanding. Theo scooped her up into his arms, carrying her effortlessly toward their bedroom. That night, for the first time, Charlie knew what it felt like to be truly loved. And for the first time, Theo realized that love was never meant to be bound by a contract. The next day, Theo canceled the contract, but not to say goodbye. He did it to create a new commitment, one with no expiration date. 2 months later, under the golden sun on a breathtaking beach, Theo knelt before Charlie, a sparkling ring in his hand. "I once thought I would spend my entire life alone," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But you changed everything. Charlie, will you marry me, not because of a contract, but because of real love?" Charlie laughed through her tears. "Yes, you idiot, I will." They had a real wedding, surrounded by family and friends. No more contracts, no more terms, no more expiration dates, only love. 6 months after their wedding, on an early morning, Charlie walked toward Theo, holding a small white stick in her hand. "Theo," she called softly. He looked up from his newspaper, his expression instantly filled with concern. "I have news." She smiled, tears shimmering in her eyes. "I'm pregnant." Theo stared at her. For a full 3 seconds, as if his brain had completely shut down. Then suddenly he scooped her up, spun her around and laughed. Loud, joyous, utterly free. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious." Charlie waved the pregnancy test with 2 bold pink lines in front of him, like a victory flag. Theo was still frozen, his mouth slightly open, as if his billionaire brain was trying to process the information in the most logical way possible. "You're going to be a dad," she smirked, playfully wiggling the test in front of him. Theo finally snapped out of it. He stepped forward, cupped her face in his hands, and looked into her eyes, his deep gaze overflowing with emotions. "Are you sure?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Charlie raised an eyebrow. "Where do you think I got these 2 pink lines from? A lottery ticket?" Theo chuckled before pulling her into the tightest embrace, holding her as if she might disappear if he let go. "I can't believe it. I'm going to be a father. My God, I'm really going to be a father." Charlie gazed up at him, her lips curving into a mischievous smile. "That's right. And you know what that means." Theo stepped back slightly, narrowing his eyes in suspicion. "What do you mean?" Charlie crossed her arms, feigning seriousness. "Do you remember the terms in our contract?" Theo blinked. "What?" She sighed dramatically before speaking slowly and deliberately. "The clause that says when the contract ends, you owe me $1 million? Theo frowned. "Charlie, we're actually married now. That contract isn't valid anymore." Charlie placed a hand on her belly, her eyes twinkling. "Well, I'm carrying your child, which means I'm kind of extending the contract in a way, right? An unfulfilled obligation, an outstanding debt." Theo stared at her. Then suddenly he laughed. He shook his head. "Are you serious?" Charlie pouted. $1 million. That could buy me a lifetime supply of ice cream to satisfy my cravings?" Theo chuckled, wrapping his arms around her from behind and whispering into her ear. "Charlie, you know I'll pay you in another way." She blinked. "And what way is that?" Theo placed his hand gently over her belly, his voice deep and tender. "By loving you and our child for the rest of my life." Charlie froze for a moment. Then she laughed, but this time her eyes glistened with more emotion than ever before. "Fine, I guess I'll accept this payment method." Years later, on the same beach where Theo had proposed, 2 little boys ran along the shoreline, their laughter mixing with the sound of crashing waves. The older one had Charlie's warm brown eyes, but Theo's serious expression. The younger one had Theo's jet black hair, but Charlie's radiant smile. They were arguing over a tiny crab, both determined to claim victory. Charlie stood at a distance, watching them with a soft, contented smile. Theo stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and whispering in her ear, "You know, I never actually paid you that $1 million. Charlie leaned into him, grinning. "It's okay. I think I've already made enough interest." They stood there by the ocean, watching their sons play under the golden sunset. No contracts, no clauses, no expiration dates, only love. And this time, when Charlie wrote a small note and tucked it into a gift box for Theo, it wasn't a marriage contract. It was just a simple sentence: "Our love has no expiration date." Thank you for following our story. Did this story touch your heart? Leave a comment below. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel.